LeBron is looking for the exits in LA. The NBA draft could be on the clock in another week, another betting scandal in sports. It's all straight ahead on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. All right, welcome back to Gordon Damer on Sports, jam-packed episode, once again, episode 20. As always, please hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new episode, and please visit my website, gordondamer.com. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Now, today we'll be touching on LeBron and the Lakers, the latest betting scandal, and why the focus for blame for many is wrong. Also, we'll touch on how Nike tried to engineer some female empowerment just to sell some more sneakers. But first, let's dive in with the story that caught my eye the most. We start with the biggest story coming out of the NBA draft, a story that might not only reshape how teams operate, but maybe, just maybe in time, could put the entire NBA draft model on the clock. So the biggest story this year at the draft had nothing to do with wingspan or verticals or even who had the best outfit on draft night. No, the story this year of the NBA draft was a story about power, specifically who has it, who wants it, and how much longer the NBA and their teams can pretend the teams are still the ones in control. It's the story about Ace Bailey, and it may just mark the beginning of a new era. So let's start at the top. Who exactly is Ace Bailey? Well, in case you weren't following the build-up to the 2025 draft, Bailey is an 18-year-old, 6'8" wing out of Rutgers with a great jumper, big-time athleticism, and shot creation ability that had scouts comparing him possibly to a young Paul George. He's explosive in the open court, he's dangerous in isolation, and he's blessed with the kind of size and frame that gets noticed in front offices. Coming into the draft, Bailey was a consensus top 3 pick on nearly every board. Some had him going as high as 2 right after Cooper Flagg. His ceiling is an all-star. His floor, still better than most rotation players currently in the league. Sure, there's a bust factor, but teams look at the ceiling, and his ceiling is high. But an interesting thing happened as the draft approached, something strange. Bailey intentionally began hurting his own draft stock. He declined workouts. He ignored interviews. His camp made it very clear this was not about being drafted as high as possible. This was about the best fit. Yeah, you heard that right. Bailey's team was not chasing the highest pick possible. They were chasing the right team, the one that would set him up best for long-term success, for development, for the best opportunity to reach his full potential. So he refused to meet with teams like Philadelphia or Charlotte or Utah, organizations sitting in the top 5. And he was not quiet about it either. His manager, Omar Cooper, made it known. The ideal destinations, Washington, Brooklyn, maybe New Orleans. Now that kind of posture is rare, but the logic was clear. If he thrives in the right situation, sure, by dropping a few spots, Bailey was sacrificing $10 to $15 million on his rookie deal, but his camp's logic was clear. If he thrives in the right situation, he'll make that money back and more on his second contract. This was long-term thinking, business thinking, but it made people nervous. Agents, executives, GMs, teams, because they saw something deeper underneath. Bailey doesn't need the NBA to make him rich. He kind of already is. You see, this is where the game has changed. Bailey is not another talented teenager with hoop dreams. He's a businessman at this point, a brand, even before he steps into the green room on draft night. Thanks to NIL, name, image, and likeness, top college players now arrive at the NBA, not with dreams of wealth, but with actual wealth. They've got endorsement deals and social media followings, appearance fees. They're not entering the league for money. They already have some money. And that kind of leverage could be a problem for a system that was built on players not having any money. You see, the draft was constructed in a world where being picked meant everything. It was the ticket, the only way to get paid and to be seen and to make it. But now NIL has made that kind of obsolete. And the Ace Bailey saga is the clearest sign yet. Maybe you noticed it at the draft this year. Certainly seemed like players were not nearly as emotional as they usually are. Perhaps it's because they've already made a ton of money. They're millionaires or close to it by the time the names are called. So when you're broke, you're happy to play anywhere. But when you've got some money in your pocket, certain destinations are favored more than others. That allows you to think long term. Here's the twist, though. The NBA is at least partially to blame for this shift because for the last 30, 40 years, the league has sold itself as the home of star power. It's a star-driven league, always has been. Think about it. LeBron, Steph, Giannis, KD, these are the faces, not the franchises. And in this league, stars move the needle. They dictate the narratives. They drive jersey sales and ticket sales and television deals. But when you empower the star that much, when you build the entire structure around the individual rather than the team or the organization, don't be surprised when the next generation catches on early. Ace Bailey is just doing what the system taught him. Control your brand, know your worth, right? Shape your own future. And I think what's really scary for teams is this is not a one-off. This is not just some rogue player with an overzealous agent. Rival agents were certainly watching this play out very closely because if Bailey thrives in Utah or eventually forces a move to a more preferred destination, it becomes the blueprint. Just last year, Alex Sarr discouraged Atlanta from picking him number 1 overall, and they backed off. He landed in Washington where he wanted to be. So you can bet more top prospects are going to start skipping workouts and setting terms and picking their preferred markets because they can afford to. NIL has insulated them some because they're not desperate anymore. The old equation is kind of gone. So let's bring this back to Utah. The Jazz went 17-65 last year and looked lifeless ever since they traded away Donovan Mitchell. Their hopes of getting Cooper Flagg were dashed, and they're staring at a future of irrelevance. So what did they do? Well, they did the smart thing. They swung for the fences. They drafted Ace Bailey, even though he didn't want to be there. They bet on talent, they bet on upside, and the hope that once they get him in the building, Bailey would get on board. And now we're seeing this cleanup. Bailey is saying all the right things. His agency, GSE Worldwide, has put out statements that he's thrilled to be in Utah. It's an honor to be in Utah, and that he's going to do great things there. And maybe all of that is true. Maybe now that he's reported, he'll play well and he'll buy in. But let's not pretend like the public posturing erases the private strategy. That strategy already happened, and it played out in real time. And teams felt it. So to me, this is the big question. Can the NBA draft survive this new reality? Because this isn't just about Ace Bailey. It's about the model itself. This is not just a one-time thing. This is going to happen more regularly now. And what happens when top 5 picks stop showing up to team workouts altogether? What happens when multiple players per class start steering their own fates? What happens when teams start fearing that a pick might refuse to report? You can't have a functioning draft if the players don't feel bound by it. Now, this is not going to change anytime soon just because Ace Bailey didn't want to play in Utah, but it certainly feels like this is a changing moment. And yes, right now players have to show up eventually if they want to play in the league. But with NIL and overseas alternatives and G League options and branding power, how long before a player calls the league's bluff? So maybe it's time for the NBA to rethink the system altogether. The NBA has always been the most forward-thinking of the major sports leagues, and maybe now it's time to do it again because I don't think in time this will be sustainable. So maybe they move to a soft match draft where players and teams submit preference lists, or a zone-based model where teams can only draft from certain territories or declare intent to draft within a range. Or maybe they just get rid of the draft altogether, or move to a free agency model for rookies where bad teams are incentivized to offer higher rookie scale deals to lure top talent. It sounds crazy right now, maybe, but the alternative is a system where every year it feels like a standoff. Ace Bailey's saga kind of exposed some cracks in a structure that's been teetering for a while. Because when an 18-year-old millionaire shows up to the draft with a plan to shape his future and the league's best response is, well, let's hope he reports, that doesn't sound good. So what comes next? Well, we're going to see more players take control of their stories. We're going to see more managers calling shots and pushing strategies to help their clients. And we're going to see the NBA either adapt or struggle. Because the truth is, the draft is not sacred. It's a tool. And when that tool stops working, you don't keep pretending you fix it. So what do we learn from Ace Bailey? Well, the power has shifted some. That NIL has changed the stakes, and that draft night isn't about dreams anymore. It's about deals. And the NBA, I think, has to start thinking ahead, because this won't be the last player who chooses fit over draft slot. It won't be the last time agents try to steer clients to markets they prefer. And it definitely won't be the last time a team gambles on talent, even if the talent isn't all that thrilled to be there. Some have tried to make Ace Bailey's story about entitlement. He's just another spoiled player. But it's really about evolution. The NBA draft might not be broken, but it might be outdated. And if the league doesn't rethink it soon, it'll keep losing controls to agents and managers and players who already know they don't have to wait for a franchise to give them power because they already have it. They enter the league with it. So this is not just about Ace Bailey, it's about what comes next. And if the NBA wants to keep being the most progressive league in sports, they might need to evolve as well. All right, now let's talk about LeBron James. The NBA offseason never disappoints, and the LeBron situation just got a lot more interesting. His guy, Rich Paul, his longtime agent, gave ESPN a very carefully worded but pretty revealing statement. He said that LeBron wants to compete for championships and that he'll be closely monitoring the Lakers' offseason moves to see if they're really building a title contender. Now, he made sure to thank Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka and the whole Lakers family, but called it a critical part of LeBron's career, which sounds like the type of thing you say right before you leave wherever you're at. He said, quote, "We understand the difficulty in winning now while preparing for the future." That's a polite way of saying, yeah, sure, you've got Luka now, but don't look past my guy. And the key line, of course, was, we do want to evaluate what's best for LeBron at this stage in his life and his career. So that sounds like a player who knows his time is running out and he wants a real shot at winning another ring, whether it's with the Lakers or someplace else. So it clearly seems like LeBron and his camp is looking for the exits in LA. And honestly, that might be the best news the Lakers have gotten in a very long time, at least since they landed Luka and a new owner. The Lakers get a lot of good news frequently. But if LeBron wants out, the Lakers might need to pretend to be disappointed. But behind closed doors, they should be moving heaven and earth to help him pack. Let him go wherever he wants, because it's not a loss. This is a blessing in disguise. Because the truth is, as long as LeBron is with the Lakers or wherever, it's about LeBron. It's always about LeBron. Everything revolves around him, the roster, the rotations, the head coach, trades, everything. And while that was the deal the Lakers made when they signed him originally, that deal has run its course. The Lakers have already won their last title with LeBron, and if we're being brutally honest, it was the least significant title they ever won. The 2020 Bubble Championship came during a bizarre season, no fans, no parade. It's not one Laker fans are going to remember for eternity. So the Lakers bet big on LeBron, and they just didn't hand him the keys to the house. They let him knock down the house and build a new house. With LeBron on the team, he's bigger than the team. But those days of him being that kind of superstar are over. He's not carrying the team to another championship, certainly not in the West at age 40, and not with the rest of the league outbuilding and outthinking the Lakers at every turn. And the important part of this as well, LeBron could have taken less money. He could have helped the Lakers out if he truly wanted to chase another ring in LA. He's made, close to $1 billion in his career? But when it came time to sign a new deal, he took every last dollar. And look, that's his right, but then don't turn around and expect the team to be able to build a contender around you when you've eaten up all the cap space. But LeBron doesn't care about that. He only cares about LeBron. And it's just another example of how he expects everything. Top dollar, star teammates, all the control. And when it doesn't all line up, he starts looking for the exits. He wants the Lakers to build a championship roster with his rules and his money still on the books. So if you're the Lakers, this is not about being bitter. It's just calling it like it is. LeBron is still great on some nights. He's still an all-NBA guy at times. But his role now is messy. And it's funny, just a couple of weeks ago, he was talking about how ring culture is toxic and then turns around and starts flexing for one more title run. You know, it's kind of hard to take the moral high ground when you're also simultaneously demanding the front office go all in on a win-now plan when the Lakers are not a win-now team. It's just another example of LeBron's hypocrisy. Now, for the Lakers, to their credit, they finally seemed to get it. They didn't offer LeBron more than he had to because this team, they've got bigger things to worry about. They've got Luka, they've got their next superstar, they've got a new owner in Mark Walter who just dropped $10 billion on the team, and they got a cap situation that's going to demand precision. You know, under the new CBA, if you are not nimble, you're kind of screwed. And pouring more millions into LeBron's farewell tour, that's not nimble. every dollar spent on LeBron is a dollar that can't go towards the next big swing whenever another superstar becomes available. Because with this new CBA, flexibility is the king now, and the Lakers need all the flexibility they can get. So let's not rewrite history. LeBron got everything he asked for in LA. He got Anthony Davis, he got preferred teammates, he got 4 head coaches, 2 missed playoffs, and 1 ring. That's the resume. So if he wants to move on now, fantastic. Help him find the right landing spot. If it's in Cleveland along with Bronny, if it's in San Antonio, wherever, the Lakers should go for it and make sure they make that deal sooner rather than later. Because they're not winning another ring next year anyway, so why waste time pretending? Because LeBron's focus is always going to be on LeBron, and that's fine, but the Lakers need to start focusing on the Lakers again. And if they're going to be a title contender again anytime soon, it's not going to come with LeBron James on the team. It's time to write a new story, not a farewell tour. So say thank you. Remember the 2020 championship as much as you want, because there was a time that chasing what LeBron wants was all that any franchise would ever do, but that's no longer the case. And for the first time in a long time, it looks like the Lakers are finally ready to stop stalling and get ready to build. And that might be the best thing that's happened to that franchise in a few years. All right, one more NBA story, but unlike the draft or LeBron's future or the offseason, this is one the NBA certainly wishes would just go away. But unfortunately for all of us, I think these kind of stories are going to pop up quite regularly, and it's the Malik Beasley investigation, a scandal that, if true, again, that's a big part of this, if true, hits at the absolute core of what makes sports work: trust, integrity of the game. Because if this story turns out to be true, we're not just talking about a player who made a mistake. We're talking about a guy who lit his career on fire. All right, here's the short version. Malik Beasley is now under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York, and the focus is suspicious gambling activity linked to NBA games, and more specifically, prop bets involving his individual performance while he was with the Bucks a couple of years ago. So again, for full effect, a player in the NBA is being investigated for possibly betting on his own prop bets. And this is not some NFL over-under. This is not Super Bowl squares. This is a player, allegedly, again, betting on how he would perform in NBA games. So that's not just illegal. As a player involved in a sport, that is radioactive. So if this is true, Malik Beasley didn't just fumble the bag, he set the bag on fire. So according to reports, a red flag popped up in January of 2024. The Bucks were playing the Blazers when all of a sudden the odds on Beasley finishing with under 2.5 rebounds moved dramatically. It went from plus 120 to minus 250. That is a massive shift. That means a ton of money came in on him having under 2.5 rebounds. And that's not the kind of move of a line you would get from casual fans throwing down $10. And it's the kind of move that screams, wait a second, somebody knows something and something's up. Now, what makes this interesting is in the end, Beasley in that game grabbed 6 rebounds. So that bet lost. Whatever anyone thought they knew, they clearly didn't. And it lost early. By the second quarter, he had already cleared that number. So that is important. Because if you're investigating a gambling scandal, the bet has to hit, right? Otherwise, you're left wondering, what exactly are they chasing here? The betting pattern, which is clearly suspicious. The odds movement is very odd. But the outcome at the end of the day didn't cash. That matters. And to me, that's what makes this story feel like it's just due diligence more than a slam dunk crime, at least for now, unless there's more to the story than what we know. Maybe they're looking at other patterns or other games or other people involved. Maybe the bet itself was just the tip of a much bigger iceberg. But from the outside, a single losing bet does not exactly scream conviction. But still, it triggered something serious. And here's the part that should make every league executive stand up and pay attention. This is not just some fringe story. This is not just some fringe player in the league. Beasley played in all 82 games last year. He hit the second most threes in the league, 319 of them. And the Pistons were reportedly about to lock him up on a new contract, 3 years and $42 million. All of that is on hold for now, rightfully so. That's what makes this story far bigger. Here's another big problem. Not all gambling scandals are the same, and prop bets, they've opened up a new Pandora's box. Think back to the classic gambling scandals that you know. The biggest one, obviously, is the 1919 Black Sox, where they were paid to throw the World Series. But even if you have the 78 Boston College point shaving scandal, which involved Henry Hill from Goodfellas, which is something we're going to cover on an upcoming episode, those games, though, were about full outcomes, right? Whole teams, big swings. They're much easier to spot. If an ace pitcher walks the ballpark in the first inning or a basketball team can't hit a shot, you'll notice. Prop bets, though, are different. They're small, they're subtle, and in many cases, ridiculously easy to manipulate. Think about it. What's easier to detect? A team tanking a whole game or one guy stopping at 2 rebounds? That's the difference. That's why today's scandals, the Jonte Porters, the Beasleys, are so much harder to catch. You don't need a network of guys. You just need one guy, one number, and a little text to a friend possibly. So Jonte Porter, who played just a handful of games in the NBA, he was banned for life last year for this kind of behavior. He leaked inside information. He cashed in prop bets, left games early with suspicious injuries, and guess what? He pled guilty to wire fraud, and he's awaiting sentencing in December. So let that sink in. A guy who was an NBA player went from being on the floor to standing before a federal judge. That's not a slap on the wrist. That is a criminal case. And now Malik Beasley could be staring down the same path. Again, if it's true. What bothers me is the part that a lot of people miss. Legalized sports betting is not the villain here. I'm sure it will be painted that way, but it's the reason that we're catching this kind of stuff. If you think for 1 second this type of behavior didn't happen before sports betting was legal, think again. The difference is we never knew about it. Back then, the bets were placed in back rooms and offshore sites. There was no paper trail. There was no red flags. There was no accountability. Now, FanDuel and DraftKings and all the others are licensed, are regulated, and are using sophisticated tracking software that flags this suspicious movement. I'm sure that whatever sportsbook was involved here are the ones who tipped off the investigators, who tipped off the authorities. It was these sportsbooks that flagged the unusual betting on Beasley's props, just like they did with Porter, just like they did with Calvin Ridley in the NFL. This is not a bug. This is a feature. And if you want a real thought experiment, imagine if DraftKings had been around during the Tim Donaghy scandal. Maybe he gets caught earlier. Maybe the refs he influenced get flagged before it ends up on the front page of the papers. And maybe, just maybe, the NBA saves itself a ton of embarrassment. Now, legal sportsbook betting has its flaws, but one thing it's doing right is catching the people who try to game the system. And it's doing it faster than any league office or security team ever could. Now, I will admit, one problem we need to talk about is the volume, as in how many things you can bet on at once. You want to know the most vulnerable corner of the legalized sports betting market? It's a random Tuesday night in the NBA where you've got some guy you've never heard of listed at over under 2.5 assists. You know who's not catching that guy? Anybody. The media, fans, sometimes even the coaches. And that to me is the danger, because fringe players, the 8th, 9th, 10th guy on the bench, they have just enough minutes to matter, but not enough scrutiny to stop them. They're the weak link in the chain. And these sports books are offering prop bets on all of them. Hundreds per night, every board, every rebound, every free throw, every assist. We're not just letting people bet on the games. We're letting them bet on the molecules, the atoms of the game, the greatest minutia of the game. So maybe it's time to pull that back. Maybe we don't need props on players averaging 8 minutes a game. Maybe we don't need betting on whether the backup center gets 2 blocks in garbage time. Because the more bets you offer, the more cracks you leave open, and some guys will find them. But what the NBA has to do now is clear, and they've already done this, and they have to make it permanent. No second chances, no year-long banishments. If you're caught betting on games that you're involved in, or any games in the sport that you're in, you are done. That sends a message. Lifetime ban. So we'll see where this Beasley investigation goes, if it leads to any charges or it just kind of fades away. But if Beasley, coming off, 16 points per game, a career high in threes in an 82-game season, if this was something he was doing, he's gone. That's the only way you can send a message to the next guy to make sure he thinks twice and doesn't do it. So the bottom line here is, if Malik Beasley gambled, and again, it's a big if he gambled on NBA games, especially his own stats, he's not coming back. Not after Jonte Porter, not with the league's credibility in the crosshairs, not when every bet placed is being watched and tracked and flagged. But also, let's be clear about something else. This is not the last time something like this is going to happen. We're in a new era, and betting is legal, it's accessible, it is woven into the fabric of sports. The temptation is not going away. Sports betting is not going away, no matter how many people scream and yell about it. What matters is how leagues respond and how quickly they separate a personal failure from a systematic collapse. This is not a society problem. It's not the downfall of sports as we know it. This is a Malik Beasley problem, if true. He's the guy who made the choice. So the same sports books that critics will rush to blame, they didn't cause this, they caught it. They didn't invent gambling, they just dragged it into the light. So stop pretending this is the end of the world. But if the allegations stick, it clearly is the end of Malik Beasley's NBA career. All right, one last story for this episode that did not get a lot of attention, probably did not come across your timeline. And the attention it got, I think, was for the completely wrong reason. So this week in Paris, Faith Kipyegon, one of the great runners the world has ever seen, tried to do something no woman has ever done before. Run a mile in under 4 minutes. Now, spoiler alert, she didn't do it. She ran 4:06, which is incredible. She shaved more than a second off her own personal record. She's already the world record holder in it. She's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist and maybe the best middle distance runner of her generation. I'm not the guy to judge this. This is what the experts say. But yet somehow that wasn't enough, because this entire event, this made for TV, made for viral content event, was not about her greatness. It was about chasing a number that was only impressive because a man did it first. That's what this was. This whole thing was framed and marketed by Nike as Faith versus the 4-minute mile, which is another way of saying Faith versus the men's standard of greatness. And at this time, and in 2025, we've got to stop doing that. So this was not about her breaking her own world record. This was not about pushing the limits of what a woman can do on her own terms. No, this was a made-for-marketing ploy built around the idea that women's excellence only really matters when it can be measured against men. And let's be real, this was not about Faith's dream. This was Nike's dream of headlines and viral content and hashtags of history being made with their Nike swoosh front and center. They built this entire thing around this magical 4-minute mark like it's the holy grail of athletic achievement, forgetting that it's not even the world record in her division. She already owns the world record in her division. But hey, records she already broke don't sell new gear, right? World champ does it again doesn't move as much product as woman breaks impossible male barrier. So this was all a branding ploy disguised as female empowerment, but the message was clear. To be truly legendary, to be iconic, you need to do what a man did 30, 40 years ago. I don't even know when. Nike poured millions of dollars into this thing. They brought out all the high-tech gear. They had aerodynamic pacers, most of the men, of course, and sold this as a breakthrough moment for all women. They even brought out Carl Lewis, who on the broadcast said, quote, "Sometimes you have to change the rules for people that are special." Change the rules? Faith is already special. She doesn't need new rules. She's the one who has already rewritten the rules with her greatness. So I have to ask the obvious question, why is this 4-minute mile the magical mark? Why is that the bar that women now have to chase? Because here's the thing, the physiology is different. The training cycles are different. The sports are different. But instead of framing this as Faith pushing the boundaries of what a woman's body can do, which is already historic, we turned it into a failed attempt to match a man's pace from the 1990s, which is not just unfair, it's really kind of condescending. It's basically saying, hey, great job on your world record, great job on all your success, but when are you going to finally catch Roger Bannister? And she didn't overpromise. The science didn't overpromise either. This was all based on a February study which laid it all out, that this would be possible if Faith was at her absolute peak in perfect conditions with maximum help. And then, even then, maybe. And you know what's funny? Curiously absent from the narrative was a second study, a more conservative analysis published back in April, co-authored by a Nike scientist even, which concluded that the current data was insufficient to suggest that a sub 4-minute mile is imminent. That study didn't make it into the company's marketing. In other words, at least one person at Nike knew that this was a long shot. But the myth of inevitable breakthroughs sell better than statistical uncertainty. And as we saw this week, Faith didn't break the barrier. And to be blunt, she really wasn't even close. She trimmed 1.2 seconds off her personal best, but she needed more than 6 extra seconds to cross the line that she was chasing. And in elite running, you don't need to be an expert to know that's a world of difference. But of course, nuance doesn't sell sneakers. So instead, we got history is about to be made. And when it wasn't, we got silence. No accountability from the marketing machine, just a shrug and a new ad for a high-performance sports bra. And look, I'm not here to take anything away from ambition. Go for the impossible. Go big or go home, as they say. But stop acting like women have to run like men to be considered great. Her greatness is in dominance in her field against the best women on the planet, rewriting the limits of performance in her sport. That's not empowerment. It's not progress. You're not pushing women's sports forward by asking them to chase male milestones. You're just repackaging the same old standard and calling it equality to go viral and to sell a few more sneakers at $120 a pop. Faith doesn't need to run a man's time to prove she's great because it's obvious she already is. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've not already, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And check out GordonDamer.com. Love to hear your thoughts on that as well. You can sign up for the newsletter there too. And we will see you a little later this week on another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.